Okay, we're ready for the next speaker? Let's make it happen, guys. Okay, please welcome Richard Brendan. Woo! Here you go, buddy. Woo! Yeah.
Very strange being on stage when I'm usually in the back as a co-producer of this event. I wanted to start off with this. The world now is way too dangerous, but also too beautiful for anything but love. There was a rabbi who got that. He was giving instruction to a classroom of children one day, and he asked them this question: how do you know the night is over and the day has come? Little boy in the back raised his hand and said, "Oh, I know. You know the night is over and the day has come when in the early morning dawn you can tell the difference between a horse and a donkey." Rabbi acknowledged the response, repeated the question. Little girl on the side of the room said, Rabbi, I know. You know the night is over and the day has come when you can tell the difference between an apple tree and a pear tree." The rabbi acknowledged the response and he repeated the question. Finally, a little boy in the front said, "Rabbi, will you please give us the answer to the question you just posed?" And the rabbi got quiet and he got very present with them. And he said this: "You know the night is not over and the day has not come when you can look into the eyes of every human being and there see your brother or your sister." He said, "For if you see your brother or your sister, you know the night is over and the day has come." I want to share tonight 3 stories that came to me about a month ago. This whole year I've been doing mostly a life review, scaling back, learning to love myself, taking care of myself. And a lot of memories have been coming back to me. And there are 3 people I want to profile tonight that awakened within me 3 archetypes that have been very important to me, that have come and gone, but have now come back with full roar. The first one, Denny Claude. Now, I don't know who that guy is standing next to him. He's got a big-ass Bible in his hand, so I'd be a little concerned about that. Back in the day, I would take these mission trips to Haiti. I don't know where my love for the Haitian people came from. I've made 5 trips now. I hope to go back next year. You know, it's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. That many children. 10% of those children end up dying by the time they're age 4. And every year, about 300,000 children are enslaved. That was the environment in which Denny and his beautiful family were raising their kids. We went over there on my first trip. This was taken on my first and second trips to Haiti, thinking we were going to provide love and compassion for the Haitian people. And in a way we did. But what surprised me was the love and compassion they gave me. 2 experiences I want to share. One, Denny and I and some of my team were walking up in one of the hills in Haiti. Now, Haiti is somewhat romantic at night in the sense that the hillsides and the mountains are filled with fires everywhere. There's villages just everywhere. You could be walking on a path, and next thing you know, you're in another village. And you hear a lot of the drums beating, a lot of the voodoo drums. Haitis, even if they're Christian, continue to practice voodoo. And you hear that at night, and you smell the charcoal fire. And I remember this. Denny and I were engaged in conversation. 3 or 4 of the other team were too. And next thing I know, I'm looking around. It's getting dark. And Denny and I are by ourselves. The rest of the team took off on a whole other path. I didn't know where they were. I wasn't fearful because Denny was with me. But we ended up in this village. It was getting very dark now. And all of a sudden, these kids came out of the woodwork. All these children, and I kept hearing, "Blanc, Blanc, Blanc, white guy, white guy." And all I could think of was 2 things. Holy shit, that's a lot of kids. But the second thing was this. My heart was already opening up. That was my first trip to Haiti. I was beginning to see what these people were going through, and yet at the same time, they had joy, and their life was full, and they were very committed to their families. And all I remember is, I'm there, it's dark, and all these children started jumping on me. And all I could think about was Jesus saying, "Let the little children come unto me." And a couple of these little boys grabbed on my arms, and they were hanging on my arms. I was a whole lot younger then, so I could do that. And I just relished in that. And I remember thinking about, we talk about serving our neighbor, and that's when I got that idea that our neighbor is just not across the street, our neighbor is across the sea. And I thought about the rabbi story. And so I saw into their eyes my brothers and sisters. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences I ever had. And Denny modeled that for me. The second trip I got back to Haiti, he and his family invited me to their house. They were very proud of their home. Their home wasn't very big, as you can imagine. It was probably as big as my living room is now. And they didn't have much in there. And I didn't even know what they were going to serve. You know, when you go to countries like this, you're always warned, be careful what you eat, be careful what you drink. I've been there 5 times. I've never been careful. If a Haitian offers me something, I'll drink it or eat it. And guess what? I've never been sick. I mean, how about that? So they served me this meal. Kids were delightful. And I realized out of their lack, they were so rich. And by the time I came home on that second trip, I realized they showed me the compassion that I thought we as a team from America was going to show them. But what Denny did by watching him, he modeled for me, and he opened my heart up to what I would call an archetype of the priest. The heart of a priest. And we're going to need that in these days because the world is too dangerous and too beautiful for anything but love. The second story I want to share, Dr. Al Chiskin. Now, Dr. Al was my biology professor at Purdue University in West Lafayette. This was Biology 101, 600 lecture hall class. And the thing about Al, a couple things were really cool about him. First of all, me and some of my buddies would sit in the back, and he would bust us every time for talking. 600 students in this room. We're sitting in the back. And he said, "You in the purple shirt, yeah, you, stop talking." And we wondered, my God, that guy, how can he hear us talk? And then we heard things about he and his wife, Martha. She was a biology professor too. And they had adopted 4 African-American children. A couple of them were mentally challenged. And we thought, wow, what a hip family to do that. That was great. This is back in the 70s. I was very involved in studying the life of Martin Luther King at the time. I heard about an organization called Amnesty International. And then I heard that Al was doing research for Amnesty International, donating all kinds of hours of his time to that organization on the effects of physical torture on political prisoners. So it was in the winter. It was January. I set an appointment with him. It was already dark. There was snow on the ground. Remember like it was yesterday. I wanted to learn about Amnesty International. I thought 20-minute meeting tops. I went in there, and Al proceeded to tell me the reason why he got involved with Amnesty International. 2 hours later, my face white as a sheet, my jaw probably dropped on the floor, shocked by everything he told me in detail. He told me that in 1963, he graduated from Princeton University with a PhD in biology. Because he was a man who had compassion and cared about his fellow man, he decided to volunteer his time as a bondsman for Dr. Martin Luther King in Birmingham, Alabama. So there he goes down there, and he kept repeating this phrase, "I was a PhD candidate from Princeton University. I was a white PhD candidate from Princeton University," volunteering his time. Within 8 hours, he was abducted by 4 citizens in Birmingham, all white. He found out later that one was a mail carrier, another owned a bake shop. They could be your neighbors. And for 8 hours, they abducted him, took him to an abandoned building, and tortured him repeatedly with an electric cattle prod. That's when I found out he didn't hear us, he lip reads. He lost most of his hearing because they stuck him in his ears. And why they adopted the children they did is because they sterilized them with the electric cattle prod. 8 hours, repeatedly, one human treating another human that way over and over and over again with electric cattle prod. He must have seen my face was white as a ghost, and he said, "You know, Richard, the reason I'm telling you this is because here at the university, there are a lot of students that want to come to talk to me. And I want them to know I admire your altruistic heart. But racism will never leave." Now, this was in 1978. He said, "Racism that I experienced in the 60s, which has been around far before that, is just lying dormant under the ground. But it will never leave. And I want you to know, don't be a white knight in shining armor riding on a white horse to save the day." He said, "You need to have the heart of a warrior, but also you need to have that discernment." And after that meeting, I thought so much. It took me a couple of days to get over the meeting that I had with him. I joined Amnesty International and got involved for years. And Al, by his modeling, by his example, wakened up in me that heart of a warrior that you need. Because the kind of compassion we're talking about tonight is not just a Hallmark card kind of compassion. Compassion can also not only upset the apple cart, it can totally obliterate the apple cart. But the final story, Mildred. Now, back in the day, a lot of people would drive by Mildred in Brownsburg. Yeah, they called her the bag lady of Brownsburg. And sometimes I would drive by too. I'd see her muttering and pushing a shopping cart, and nobody really knew who she was. Nobody stopped to talk to her, and she just kind of disappeared. Well, one day I saw Mildred enough. I was in a coffee shop right across the street from where she lived, and she was sitting in the corner drinking some hot chocolate. And I decided to walk up to her. I asked her for permission to sit down. She kind of muttered and said, "Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh." I found out later she always said that, "Uh-huh, uh-huh." So I don't know if she really wanted me to sit down or not, but I did. Not a lot of conversation taking place, but after 2 or 3 and 4 times, she started to talk a little bit. I got a dear friend of mine who has a compassionate heart involved in this too. We started meeting with Mildred, and very slowly her face started to rise up a bit, and then she started to talk a little bit, always with a stutter. Rarely was she doing a uh-huh, uh-huh. Then my friend's book study group adopted her, and they started taking her to church activities and book study groups. The senior pastor who I was working for in Brownsburg ended up becoming a legal guardian of Mildred. We were then invited into Mildred's home, and that's when he found out Mildred had a brother named Paul, who nobody ever saw. He was wheelchair bound. He never got out of the house. These people dropped through the safety net in society. Nobody gave them the time of day. But by the time we got into that house, we cleaned the house. I remember about 9 months into this journey, Mildred was so excited and so appreciative, and she said, "Richard, I baked you a chocolate pie." She handed it to me, and it was sloshing around, and I looked at it, and I go, "Yum, I'll eat that later, Mildred, but thank you, sweetie." Fast forward to a year later. It's homecoming time. Homecoming is a big deal in suburbs like Brownsburg. Got the fire truck, got the convertibles, got the candy being thrown by the football players. My kids who were younger then, we used to fight over Tootsie Rolls. And I would see the homecoming queens and homecoming princesses and the homecoming king cars, and some football players tossed a whole handful of Tootsie Rolls out on a corner. I remember that corner in Brownsburg to this day. I playfully dove to try to fight over the Tootsie Rolls, and I'm down like this, and I look up out of the corner of my eye, and on this convertible passing by me was the name of the assisted living where Mildred lived. I said, "Assisted living? They had a queen contest?" And I looked up even farther, and it was Mildred. She was a homecoming queen. I watched her change and transform over a period of a year simply because of love and compassion. There wasn't any therapy. People just loved her for who she was. And there she was in all her glory with an awkward wave and the crown trying to hop off of her head. And when I was down there on one knee and I'm looking at that, and Spirit speaks to me, and Spirit says, I'll love you if produces problems, but I'll love you no matter what produces prophets and kings, and yeah, even homecoming queens. I'll never forget that. And then I remember tears rolling down my face because I looked around to the crowd and people were applauding and said, oh, isn't that cute? And I knew every one of those people had no clue who that lady was. She was a lady a year prior they would drive by and call her a bag lady. And that opened up into me the heart of a prophet. So now we go back to the rabbi story. I totally believe, and I'm living my life, that one day, if we choose to walk our talk, if we choose to open up our hearts a little bit to the heart of a priest, that's that compassion and love and generosity. The heart of a warrior that says, hell no, not on my watch. And if we open up our hearts to be the heart of a prophet, not just looking at the circumstances that they are, but pointing a vision that's much bolder, much kinder, much grander for all of humanity, then I really believe this, then we can all say one day that, you know what? The night is finally over, and thank God the day has come. Thank you very much.
Wow.